Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Canada Immigration Live Q&A. I'm here with my faithful and diligent compadre, Alicia. How you doing today?
I am doing okay, Mark. I've got a child that just came out of dental surgery, so I'm a little bit distracted by that. As a parent, it's always hard when you've got kids who are totally out of it. So yeah, but other than that, I'm good.
I hear you. Most of my kids, I think Michaela, my last one, who is graduating this weekend, I think she's the only one that hasn't had that trip to the dentist to deal with the wisdom teeth issue. So I've got a few under my belt here, but yeah, they're all react differently. You know, I remember, Alicia, while we're on this topic, because of course this is what people want to hear, is about our families and our dental experiences. But I remember when I was still in high school, my older brother was getting ready to go on a mission for our church, and they had to deal with his teeth. And anyways, I knew he had a bad experience, but this is, you guys will like this. So I knew he had a bad experience because he was black and blue. And when he came home, he was like out of commission for a couple of days. This is the early days, probably, I don't know what, like 35 years ago or something. Anyways. And then I was dating this girl, you know, after I graduated, and she had a friend who was a dental hygienist. So we're really going through this now. And she remembers a time when they were doing a surgery on this guy, and the surgeon nicked an artery or something like that, and he was bleeding all over. So much so that one of the dental assistants passed out on the floor. And after a little bit of digging, I realized it was my brother. So that was his experience getting his wisdom teeth out. So when it was my turn to get mine out, he was just waiting. He was so excited because he thought, yeah, you were mocking me at that time. You just wait, because when you go in, you're going to have the same experience. Well, I went in. I got my wisdom teeth out earlier that morning. And that evening, I went to play basketball with my friends. So literally, I had no issues whatsoever. And he's never kind of let me down. He's never let me live that down, I guess is the best way to describe it. So there you go, guys. The crazy things that happen. So, hey, why not? Yesterday, I was showing them the pictures of my rattlesnake, Alicia. So I'll hold off on that today. If you guys want to watch my rattlesnake adventures, you can watch the live stream from yesterday. That's up on the YouTube channel and wherever you're watching this. So
it is worth watching. I do have to say it is worth watching.
I had lots of fun. So we are right in the midst of today's the last day of the Masterclass for the Express Entry course that I teach, and we've got a great group of people that have connected in. And one of the things that we've started doing with the course is, you know, anyone who subscribes to the course, they say, well, it's kind of late. I might not get access to the Masterclass. Well, we've actually opened it up. So anytime at any point that you've ever purchased the course in the history of time, you can join any future Masterclass. So we do another one tonight at 4. So if you've purchased it in the past, remember, all you have to do is check your email, your inbox, and you will have been invited to a private group, and that group is open, so you can come anytime you want in the future. So one of the things that I see often, Alicia, is that people wait until the last minute to then subscribe to the course. Well, there's like 10 hours of content. And by the time the master classes come around, people haven't had a chance to go through the lessons, and they realize, oh, I don't really have anything to ask because I'm not quite sure where the problem areas are. Well, that's one of the advantages to subscribing now, because you'll have access to all those future master classes, depending upon when you really need the help. So thought I'd let everybody know about that. And that cart, we've decided to keep that open right now. So you can click on the link below to access it. All right, let's see here. I'm going to pull this off here, and let's see who we've got tuning in. So we've got Salim. He says, hello, Mark and Alicia. Gilvina 3.0. Oh, interesting. I wonder what became of 1.0 and 2.0. Maybe you are a new improved person, Gilvina. All right, let's see what else we have here. Sahil says, hey, how are you guys doing? I'll let you answer that one, Alicia.
I think we talked about that one. So yeah, we're doing okay.
Actually, that opening song, I'm an emotional mess. I think, is that what it is? I'm overheated or something. I don't know the emotional mess, I think, is what it's called. That pretty much describes, this last round is, as I'm getting ready to graduate my last child, my baby. And tomorrow's we'll be getting ready tomorrow, and then Saturday is when we actually have the graduation. So it will be a milestone. It'll be a transition. Now, I'm not an empty nester because they go and they come back, and none of them are married yet, and so the Holthe family is still fully intact. And my son, my youngest son, Connor, he's just older than Michaela. He'll be coming home in September from his mission in Chile, so it'll be fun to test out my Portuguese against his Spanish. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, we've got Boudicca's over in Richmond Hill. Welcome, Boudica. And if you haven't posted where you're tuning in from, make sure that you do that. We've got G2D2's back. Oh, nice. I still think that should be R2D2, but good to see G2D2 back from Tunisia. Let's see here. We've got Pierrette. Okay, Pierrette was a part of, let's see, Pierrette, I think, are you in the masterclass? I can't remember. Anyways, Pierrette's watching from London, UK. And let's see who else we have here. Sahil's over in Bangalore. Great to have you here. And the injured Spider-Man. I think he was casting a web and it didn't quite stick on the building. And so that must have been what happened with his ACL tear. But great to have you tuning in as well. There's Spider-Man. And he says can now walk slowly with crutches and still rehabbing in Montreal. Good for you. Promise, good to see you back again over in St. John's. Keeping our fingers crossed that you're going to get an approval on your express entry application. Promise was the winner of a surprise free access to the course because she joined me live spontaneously one day when I was doing a live stream. I thought, hey, let's pull someone in live. All right, let's see who else we've got here. Promise says, wishing your child quick recovery, Alicia. That's nice. Okay, let's see who else we've got here. We've got Nicola, who's over in Surrey, BC. Great to have you. Okay, Cajun says, hey, Mark and Alicia, in the Express Entry Rounds of Invitations page, the pool breakdown is before the draw happened or after the draw happened. Well, why don't we slide over and why don't we talk about this one? So let's just see if I can find the share screen. Oh, yeah, I've got Alicia on here. Got so many different versions of my live stream. So let's take a look at this and we can answer this one. So what do we got happening here, Alicia?
So there was a new draw, and it was a no program specified draw, which is good news because 2 weeks ago there was a very small draw, but it was a PNP only draw. So this is actually a relatively decent number of people who were issued invitations, 4,800. So a fairly big group of people were issued those invitations to apply. And the comprehensive ranking score of the lowest candidates invited was 488. So that is up from what it was before, right? Because a bunch of people piled into that pool. So then if we look down, we'll see what the score distribution was as of May 24th, which was the day that they actually did the round of invitations. So on May 24th, this was who was sitting in the pool. So keep in mind they scooped 4,800 of them. So this is what it was, and then we've got the 4,800 invitations, and then it'll break it down by range. So anybody who had the probably above 600 probably had a PNP or extremely high human capital. There were a number of people, everybody between 501 to 600 was scooped up as part of that draw. And then some of the people in the next ranges were scooped up, right? So 491 was scooped up, between 481 and 490, that's where you only got some of those applicants who were drawn from that pool.
Yeah. And if we go back to the original question, Yi says, the pool breakdown, is it before the draw happened or after the draw happened?
So this is before the draw happened. So this is who was in there at the time that they did the draw.
There we go. Yes. So this is the way it looked immediately before. And the interesting thing is sometimes we'll see that the actual statistics that they provide are a couple days old. And so as we're going through this, you can now get a very clear idea of who was in the pool immediately preceding. So that's a good question.
And just while we're on this, Mark, Flying to Canada is asking what is actually a tie-breaking rule, and we've talked about this lots on the live Q&As, but I do want to just cover it quickly here again. So if you look at the tie-breaking rule, this only applies. So tie-breaking rule only applies if you had a CRS of exactly 488. So if you had a CRS score of exactly 488, well, then immigration says, well, how do I pick between these applicants? Everybody's exactly at 488. So what they do is they say, well, we're going to give a cutoff. We're going to say whoever had their profile, their express entry profile, in and valid earlier is going to have preference. Those are the people that we're going to scoop up, and then we're going to cut it off. And the date that they decide to cut it off, in this case, was December 26, 2022. So if you had exactly 488, then the tie-breaking rule would apply, and they're going to get the people who had a profile that have been sitting and active and valid in the pool since December 26th of last year. If you have more than a 488, you don't need to worry about the tie-breaking rule. But this is why Mark and I always say, if you are eligible for express entry, you meet all the minimum eligibility criteria, it is helpful to have your profile in the pool as soon as you can get it in the pool, because this is where you could benefit from the tie-breaking rule.
Exactly. So anybody, if you submitted on December the 26th after 1:12:48 UTC time, you would not have received an ITA. All right. Great question. Great question. Let's slide on back here. I'm doing things manually here today, guys, so bear with me if I'm showing a whole bunch of different views here, different looks. Okay, let's continue down. We'll do a couple more shout outs here, and then we'll dive right back into the questions. So we've got Acelings in Guyana and Legit 90s. Oh, there's a nice one. I should go to that channel and check it out. Maybe there's some sweet tunes. That was my era. And we've got LinkedIn connected in. Hello, Suzanne. It's great to have you. I guess Susan Marie. And we've got the White Bunny Immigration connecting. That's a fast rabbit. Look at the speed behind that bunny on that logo. That rabbit's cruising. All the way from Toronto. Welcome. And then we've got Ask Vin, who's in Sherwood Park. Hello, Ask Vin. And what would be the main discussion for this live? All right. Do you want to answer that one for Harpreet here?
Absolutely. So Harpreet, Mark and I are immigration lawyers, and in order to give back, what we do is try to build some information and try to help people who have questions about immigration law and need to have a reliable source to go to. We can't provide specific immigration legal advice because that would require much more information so that we understand really in depth what is going on for your circumstances, because it wouldn't be fair or ethical or legal for us to give specific legal advice without understanding the full context of your situation. But what we can do is answer questions. So we can answer some questions that are going to be of general importance or help for a number of people who are struggling with Canadian immigration law issues. And specifically, we love express entry. That is our bailiwick. That's where we do most of our applications. We also do a number of other types of business immigration or sponsorship applications for permanent residency. So we can answer those questions also.
I think I'm going to move this out of the way. I keep selecting the wrong scene here when I'm flipping back and forth. Yes, just to reiterate, yes, like Alicia said, we're a law firm. Holthe Immigration Law is our law firm. You can go to our site. You can read, like, there's a ton of content, information to help you. If you need assistance, just click on Speak to a Lawyer and you can book a consult and we can address those specifics. Now, we've got one here that I'm going to bring up, a super chat that came through, Alicia, that is, I think we can tackle, like Alicia said, we can't give you advice. How do I qualify for immigration? Or should I travel? Or those kinds of things. So here's a question from Mooncake, who, congratulations on getting your COPR, and you plan to land in Ottawa, okay? But I have a long transit in Montreal. Can I finish my landing process there? So this is a perfect example of understanding how this works. So I'm assuming that they land first in Montreal. Can I finish my landing process there? Also my last, and we'll tackle first, then we'll get into the errors in the COPR itself. But Alicia, maybe you can just touch on that and just explain, where does the landing actually take place?
Mm-hmm. So if you're traveling internationally, usually your first port of entry, so the first airport that you touch down in, and I'm not entirely sure from the wording if it is Ottawa or Montreal. It's hard for me to determine. But at any rate, whichever one you first land in, you arrive in, is where you're going to have to get your confirmation of permanent residence finally signed off by an officer and have it all finalized and finished. And then you can travel on with your connecting flights to wherever it is in Canada that you are headed. So keep in mind, this is the same thing for any sort of other immigration application too, right? If you're coming into Canada and you need a work permit, then that document's going to be issued at the first port of entry that you actually arrive at. And so sometimes people don't realize that and they have a really short connecting flight. And be prepared, Mooncake and anybody else who would be coming to Canada on requiring a document being issued by immigration, be prepared to wait, right? Make sure that you have everything in line. You have a physical copy of your application if you need to have it, all of your documents in order, a snack, a cell phone charger, so that you can wait in immigration secondary as long as you need to for that officer to be able to finalize your documents. And then you can transition on to your connecting flight. So if you have a really quick connection, you might actually miss that connecting flight. If you've got a long time to wait, you might be okay. In terms of your name, I would make sure that you are updating immigration. So send in a web form. It says specifically when you get that eCOPR documentation that you should notify them if there's any errors. So notify them if you have noticed errors in terms of a couple missing letters in your name. You'll want to keep a screenshot of the fact that you have notified them. And then before the officer actually signs off on your eCOPR, your finalized confirmation of permanent residence landing document, you want to make sure that your name is properly spelled in that final document.
And as I was looking at this, I have now, when I do these hosted versions of the lives, I don't have to do everything, think, answer questions, move to the next topic. I was looking at this, Alicia, and you can see they reference their last middle name. So I'm assuming they've got a bunch of names. And I don't know if this is the case per se. It could very well be just an error on the part of IRCC, but it may be that there just wasn't sufficient room to properly display the full name. And maybe the last couple letters or something were cut off. Sometimes that can happen. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but like Alicia said, you absolutely want to notify them, because whatever's on there, that's going to lock in as your name going forward with respect to Canada and immigration and future PR cards. Yeah, so you definitely want to address that if you can. Okay, we've got a couple other folks here. Mohammed Nur is an Ethiopian living in Sierra Leone. Welcome. And anybody who has a question, just go ahead and post those questions. You don't have to tell us that you have a question. We will see if we can answer that. All right, let's keep zipping through here.
Mark, too, I did want to just notify people. I think you also mentioned it on your live yesterday, but there were a few new announcements. And so one of them was changes to express entry because of physicians. And so self-employment as a physician is now going to be recognized. But the other thing that I did want to mention briefly is that Canada has agreements with a number of other countries in terms of international youth programs. So International Experience Canada has a number of different ways. There's normally 3 types of work permits. There's this working holiday, the young professional, or you actually could have an internship as well. So depending on the country and the agreement with Canada, some of them have nothing available, some of them have one available, and some of them have multiple programs available. So just on Tuesday, it was announced that there's a new International Experience Canada, which is under the International Mobility Program. A new agreement has been signed with youth from South Korea. So that is good news for anybody who is South Korean. And eligibility age is going to be, instead of 18 to 30, it's now going to be 18 to 35. So there will be more people who are going to be eligible for that program. And in addition, like I was saying, in addition to working holiday, there's now going to be the added options for internships or young professionals. And the reason this is important is because the working holiday is an open work permit. So there's no employer specified. However, the other two, the internship and the young professional, are employer specific, which means that if you are able to find a Canadian employer who's going to go through this program with you, then you will actually have an employer specific work permit, which, if you are able to do this properly and get 1 year of Canadian work experience that's high skilled under an employer specific work permit, you might be eligible for arranged employment points, which is 50 bonus points on your express entry, which is a big deal. So this is why that is very helpful. And it's also a longer program participation than before, or than other programs. So 2 years, 24 months, which is very helpful to gain Canadian work experience as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the way I read this, most youth will also have the option to participate twice in the program each time for up to 24 months. So this could be actually 48. And yeah, so it's really interesting to see how this plays out. And remember that these types of international experience Canada are reciprocal. So if there's Canadians out there who want to go have a work abroad experience in South Korea, they can do this. And so it goes back and forth. And you can see the existing agreement that we've had with South Korea has been around for quite a while. But this is just a new step to further expand it. And then, Alicia, maybe you might want to just, for those employers who happen to be watching, our live stream in their office, HR managers or global mobility specialists, maybe you just want to just reiterate one little thing that they need to pay attention to with respect to these types of work permits.
Absolutely. And I will note too, there's, Finland has also signed on to the IEC. So there's another notice about that. But for employers, it is really important to know that when you have an employer-specific work permit, so international co-op internship or the young professionals, those employers are now going to have to do an employer portal offer of employment. So it's similar to, in terms of oversight and compliance requirements, it's similar in that you have to make sure that you are properly following absolutely everything in the way that you offer this job. So if you were an employer doing an LMIA, a labor market impact assessment, you would have to advertise, then you would have to submit an application to the government. Only then could you hire a foreign national. The nice thing about the IEC program under the International Mobility Pathway is that you don't have to advertise and recruit for these positions, but you still do have to submit what's called the offer of employment through the offer of employment portal. So you have to have a valid account. And when you submit that offer of employment, it is up to you to make sure that you are properly following the law with respect to wages, to overtime, to a job description, to the location of work, and make sure that you are adhering to absolutely everything that you put into that job offer. Because you will be subject to compliance audits or reviews. So immigration can just randomly select to come and interview your employees or come to your place of employment or search your computers or your phones and make sure that you are properly paying people according to what it was that you committed to in that offer of employment. You have to submit that through a portal. There's a $230 government application fee that the employer must pay.
Perfect. All right, let's see here. I think we got another super that slid in. Okay, let's see. Hopefully it's one we can answer. Okay, I think this one, I'm going to tell you cooking blog here that you definitely need to book a consult. I'm going to shift over here so we've got a little bit more room. So this is a little super chat, but so it says, if you have a nomination and the employer form is handwriting and the employer mistake, I'm assuming the employer made a mistake, but the ONP withdraws your application because of that form, can we appeal on our application or what we need to do? So this is basically, who knows? We have no details, my friend, about this at all. And the reality is you really need to slide over and book a consult if you want to chat about this. But yeah, was it an alleged misrepresentation? Was the mistake something that, caused obviously you to become ineligible for the program? There's a whole host of things, and the ONP, and just like any provincial nominee program, has the ability to select candidates, and they have a lot of flexibility in how they do it. And so these things do happen from time to time, and it's disappointing that you may have lost your opportunity, but we recommend if you do want to connect, just slide over to our website. There's a link below, click on speak to a lawyer, and then we can cover this in more detail, because we don't have enough information to provide any meaningful advice or direction on this one. Okay. All right. So there's a classic one that we get a lot of. U.S. visa rejected after the first interview as a minor. Father called U.S. consulate, got the interview the next day. Visa was granted under the same application. I filed my PR application with an LOE, unsure if it counts as visa rejection. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that Sahil explained that in the letter of explanation. And if you did, that's good on you. If you didn't, well, what's your thoughts, Alicia?
So for this, if your visa was rejected, your visa was rejected. And so I would always recommend that people who had any sort of rejection, even if it was a rejection as a minor, still say, yes, I have a prior visa refusal to the US. And then in those little bubbles that they give you to explain, then you're going to put all the details similar to what you've just put here, that, you got the interview, your father was called to the consulate, the visa was granted under his application, and you ultimately were approved. But the fact remains that you were initially refused at some point in time. And it is much, much better to just disclose all of the details of that than there is to leave any room for misrepresentation, because this is one of the areas where immigration absolutely will say there's misrepresentation if people fail to disclose a visa refusal. And US visa refusals are a big one. So there have been a number of federal court cases where the federal court has said failure to disclose a US visa is fatal. It can for sure form the basis of a finding of misrepresentation that's justifiable. So be really careful about prior visa refusals.
Well, we've got a ton of really good questions piling in here. NRS says, I got an ITA. In Express Entry didn't mention spouse work experience outside Canada. Should I do it in the PR application now? It's not impacting points, but on her open work permit application, we did disclose work experience. So I think this is before they submitted the EAPR. I think so. Maybe you can address kind of, I guess, the work history versus the personal history, Alicia.
Mm-hmm. So it depends, of course, on the principal applicant and who the spouse is. And your spouse is only going to get points if they have language, if they have education, and if they have Canadian work experience. So if they are an accompanying spouse, those are the only grounds that they're going to get CRS points for. So in terms of how you structure your Express Entry profile, it usually makes the most sense not to put, or if your spouse has 0 Canadian high skilled work experience or less than a year, just put none on that. And so in the Express Entry profile, your spouse will have no work experience. And then if and when you get an invitation to apply and you're going to file the EAPR, you still need to disclose your spouse's work experience, but you're going to be putting it in his or her personal history section. So in the personal history section of the spouse, that's where everything is listed. So absolutely every single activity, even overlapping activities, if they were a student and a homemaker and they were working part-time, put everything in there with no gaps in time.
All right, let's jump to the next one here. And this is a two-parter. So Irfan says, hey, how are you doing? We applied in the TR to PR and we live in Quebec. They asked for intention to leave and we gave them the documents and they passed the eligibility. We told them we're moving in May, but due to unexpected event, we are moving in July. Is it okay? Stressed a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I actually had a consult this week about an applicant who had filed an application, was living in Quebec, but had an intention to move outside of Quebec and had provided a plan to immigration about the timelines for doing so. And immigration came back, and after a couple months, they said, we want more information, right? Give us more documentation to prove that you have this settlement plan outside of the province of Quebec. And so you do need to be really careful about this, because if you had said you had a certain timeline and now that timeline is getting extended, it's important to update immigration. And if this unexpected event is something really serious and you can justify it and you can provide evidence or proof, that's probably what you're going to want to put together in a little explanation with some documents in support and upload that by a web form to say, here's what's happening. I still have a valid intent to live outside of Quebec. Here's exactly what I'm doing. Here's documents to prove that I'm still going to do it. Because if they think that you're living in Quebec and you can't prove to them that you won't move, or that you have a strong intention not to live in Quebec, they can easily refuse the application because, of course, you're not eligible for express entry if you're living in Quebec.
Okay, this is an interesting question. We'll pull in a question from LinkedIn. Marianne Go says visa refuse. Last 10 years or all the years? So I think what she's asking is, do you only have to disclose visa refusals in the last 10 years or all visa refusals?
Mm-hmm. And sorry, just to on that last point, express entry, you're not allowed to live in Quebec. TR to PR, also not allowed to live in Quebec. So Same applies. For visa refusals, take a look at the exact wording of the question. It's a little bit different when you look at some of the forms, right? If you're looking at the 1295 or you're looking at the 5710, it's going to ask you for visa refusals. If you're looking at express entry, it also has specific wording about how many years or any visa refusal to any country. So in that case, if it's any visa refusal to any country, there's nothing saying the last 10 years. Absolutely make sure that you disclose everything.
All right, this is one I'm going to pull up here that this is great. We love questions about all aspects of express entry and otherwise, but this question relates to a blog post, that you've actually done on our site, and it says what Susan says when you create your express entry profile, what primary occupation means. Like, what is the primary occupation? What does that mean? Does it mean the job title that you claim for express entry or something else?
Mhm. So in order to be eligible for express entry, you have to meet the minimum eligibility criteria. And there's different minimum eligibility criteria for federal skilled worker, federal skilled trades, and Canadian experience. Depending on your program, so if you're looking at Canadian experience class, you're going to make sure that you have at least 1 year of high skilled Canadian work experience within the last few years. And you've got to prove that it adds up to 52 weeks, 1,560 hours of high skilled work. If you're looking at federal skilled worker, you have to prove that you have 1 year continuous of high skilled work within the last 10 years. And so, depending on which category, you have to choose a primary occupation that they can assess your minimum eligibility against. So you're going to take a look at your National Occupation Classification Code options. You're going to look at the main duties and the lead statement for the job, and you're going to carefully select the NOC code that's going to best match each period of employment. And so during all your periods of employment, every job will line up with a NOC code. And the primary occupation is the one that you want them to assess your minimum eligibility against. So yes, it's the job title you're claiming for express entry, usually. And then you can also have other job titles and other NOC codes that you can also rely on for federal skilled worker foreign work experience points, or you can look at Canadian work experience and then also get points for your foreign work experience. And those NOC codes might be different, but you still need to pick a primary occupation.
All right, we'll jump back to Sahil now. He says, and this was the visa refusal through the family. Even though the letter of explanation is attached, the question about any previous visa rejections is updated was stated no in the PR application form. Not sure if it will be considered misrep. What should I do? This one, Sahil, I'm going to ring my little triangle here. Oh, it's got the end of it. I'm going to ring it again here. You really need to slide over and book a consult, and we can take a look at this closely. But because it depends. Like, sometimes if I'm uncertain and I answer yes or no in the statutory information section, it really comes down to then what you're explaining in your letter of explanation. For example, please note I indicated no to have I ever been refused a visa because I understood the question to mean this, but here's the details. So my father had, after the first interview, then it passed anyways, and it was the same file. That kind of stuff is going to be like a shield that will protect you. But if you say no and you don't really mention it at all, and IRCC goes through and sees, oh, there's a US visa refusal and Sahil was a part of it, then yes, that can be an issue. But we'll need a whole lot more details to be able to really address that, properly. And obviously through a consult is how the best way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Geetha says, hi, Mark. My question is, if we get rejected by any of the provinces, so a PNP refusal, will that affect be on my profile? I'm assuming they're talking about express entry if I apply to other provinces. So if one province refuses an application, will that appear anywhere, I guess, is what she's asking in the context of trying to apply then to another province. And I assume that Geetha probably isn't living in Canada right now, Alicia, but I'll just make that assumption. What are your thoughts on information sharing?
So for sure, it depends. depends. I'm guessing if you're applying directly to each of the provinces and you've got your express entry profile, but usually if you have an express entry profile and you've selected all provinces and then you've applied through one of those provinces through one of their individual provincial portals, then normally there is information sharing with the governments. So if you get refused on one of them, it's quite likely that the other provincial nomination programs can see that you got refused. In terms of whether it's going to affect your application, it could, right? Depending on the reasons that you're getting refused. And so sometimes what happens is the refusal is based on they're worried about misrepresentation, or they're worried that there was something dishonest, or that you withheld details, or the claimed work experience doesn't align with what the employer was saying that they were going to have you do. So in those circumstances, those are a bit more worrisome, right? If a province sees that, then they're more worried about the legitimate intention and how honest an applicant's going to be. So you do need to be careful in terms of what you put in your application with your PNP. And I have seen this happen a number of times, because actually most of the provinces have a much more detailed application background, kind of history and addresses and work and documentation that you have to provide. It's much more detailed than your express entry profile. And sometimes people are a little bit lazy, maybe,
Lax. Mhm.
when they are preparing their provincial nominee application, and then they get to the federal skilled worker and they realize, oh, I just, I put in the most recent trip, but I didn't put in the other 5 years of trips or 10 years of trips. And then it could become a problem. So be really careful if you are looking at provincial nominee applications plus express entry, or potentially if you get refused, make sure that you are absolutely 100% thorough in your application and there's no misrepresentation.
Yeah. And remember, always remember that even, excuse me, even provincial nominee refusals, depending on which Canadian immigration application process you're going through, need to be disclosed. And when it comes to applying to various provincial nominee programs, they often ask, have you applied anywhere else? So those things are often required to be, to be attested to in the context of applications directly to the PNP and through the various federal skilled worker programs, federal high skill, all of them really. So yeah, something to keep in mind. Okay, here's shifting a little bit gears. This is back to our employer topic, which is actually really good because we'll cover this and we'll also identify. I'm just pulling up here resources. Oh yeah, Igor made some changes to our website. I like these. These are good. I'm just gonna pull up. Let's see here. There's the podcast there. So the question is, how much time does it take for the employer certificate for a company from a BC employer? So I know where they're going here, Alicia. We've got some recent experience with this, but maybe you can give a little bit of background for those who are watching, wondering what the heck is this?
So be prepared to be able to work with your employer and make sure that your employer understands what is going on through processing times, right? So um, employer certificate takes for a company
I
from a
think they're
BC
talking
employer.
about the recruiting certificate.
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
think that's what they're trying to get at. So the
Hmm.
registration process that
Yeah.
exists now in BC and other provinces. Yeah.
So it used to be, prior to last year, that there wasn't a registration process for British Columbia that was mandatory. However, because of the new changes to the regulations last September 2022, immigration said, okay, if a province has a mandatory registration process before they can file a labor market impact assessment, they need to make sure that they have this provincial employment certificate. And not very many employers had done this before in BC. It wasn't mandatory. All of a sudden it was. And there was a giant backlog. So what happened was a whole bunch of employers put in applications all at the same time, kind of flooded the system. And instead of it's supposed to only take a few days, but instead of it taking a few days, it was a few weeks. And then all of a sudden it was a few months. And then when we did our last one a few months ago, the processing times for the employer certificate had actually jumped to 4 months. So be careful when you are looking at doing an LMIA, because normally that employer certificate would just be a quick little procedure that the company can do. They get it returned back to them, and then they can file their LMIA application and have their ads running in the meantime. But because of this backlog and delay, it's probably going to take much longer than the company expects. And so that can really throw a wrench in the works. And depending on when your work permit expires or what your timelines are, you're going to want to make sure to bake in a bunch of extra time.
All right. Next question. This is from Osman, another super chat. He says he's a CEC applicant. Proof of funds is the topic. I like that. That's a good kind of lead in. I mentioned big amount of money that was sent from my parents back home. Should I include any gift letter from my parents? So now if this truly is, and we'll keep it confined to this, Alicia, he's indicating CEC applicant proof of funds. So he's, and maybe you can talk about the portal and how it, causes confusion for people.
So Osman, if you are for sure a CEC applicant and you actually got an invitation to apply under the Canadian Experience category, so take a look in your portal at your ITA letter, go down and it'll tell you which category you actually received the invitation to apply under. If it's for sure Canadian Experience class, then good news for you, you don't need to provide proof of funds. But the system is pretty generic. So instead of saying, oh, we gave them an invitation to apply under CEC, in your document checklist, we're not going to give you a mandatory upload field for proof of funds, they still do it. And so in these circumstances, it's just important to upload a little letter of explanation and say, I'm a CEC applicant and my ITA was issued under CEC, therefore I don't need to provide proof of funds, but I can provide more financial details if and when required.
Yeah. And Alicia, it's so amazing to me. There's so much information out there on the web. There's information that's on the government website. But it just never ceases to amaze me how hard it is to kind of consolidate it and just understand how it all fits in. There's program delivery instructions. There's the little buttons, information buttons that are embedded within the actual IRCC secure account when you're completing your express entry application. But even little things like that, sometimes you have to look and search through the proof of funds section to find this answer, or you go to the help desk, essentially that they post responses to common questions. And then you Google and you could get 5 different independent private websites that are saying lots of different things. And I understand why people are so confused, and I, as we have these discussions, I'm constantly plugging the course. But there's a reason for it. It's because of these things. And Pierrette, we actually, I thought I recognized the name. Says, yes, I am from the Masterclass, although not being able to attend the live sessions, has just entered the pool. That's right. You posted your question in the group. Yes. But looking forward to upcoming Masterclasses. Yes. And so with the Masterclass, and I'm just going to slide over and just explain one more time to people. This course is a comprehensive step-by-step that walks you through every aspect of the, from the beginning, understanding how it works, to literally every section, starting with the profile, figuring out eligibility with each of the programs, how to complete the profile. There's just a ton of information. Then once you get your ITA, there's sections for both the principal applicant, an accompanying spouse. If you don't have a spouse, it's on demand. You can pick and choose what you want. But this one here, mastering the documents, and this question that was just asked, I covered this in detail in the proof of funds, and there's a proof of funds section just alone for this. And there's checklists and sample documents and templates and all these different things that are all designed to help guide you. Plus the over 4 hours of live masterclass, which really is almost like unlimited live masterclass sessions that we do to just try to iron out any last little kinks that maybe you're uncertain about. And it always ceases to amaze me. Individuals will go online and they will go to some generic website and they'll follow the instructions that some person who immigrated to Canada did themselves. And they don't really know whether it's information that's actually accurate or up to date, or even if the instructions that they're being given are correct or proper. And so that's why I created the course. And so, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that one more time. Okay, and the link is always in the description below. All right, let's slide over here once again, and we're going to tackle this question. So this one is from Francis. He says, I'm an international student and need to change my program and school. My new program will, I think, start on August 2024. What should I do?
Hmm. And so, Francis, this is one of the, what should I do? We need to get way more details about what's happening in your circumstance. So, are you already in Canada? Are you transferring? Are you able to make sure that you've notified immigration about a change? Is it still a designated learning institution? Um, there are rules for students that you can't have longer than 150-day gaps in your program or between programs. There are a number of things that we need to know so that you could potentially be aware of what the pitfalls are, because there is a requirement for all students to comply with their study permit conditions. And if you fail to do so, then they can cancel your study permit or say that you're inadmissible. So be really careful here, and please book a consult and give us way more details so that we can provide some advice.
Exactly. And it's really easy. Like I said, just click on speak to a lawyer. Once you're on this page, you can choose the time that best fits your schedule. Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities either through myself or Alicia to provide you with a little bit of direction and help. Okay, we'll slide back here, get to our next question. This one's from Ronald. He says, hey, Mark and Alicia, I'm soon entering the express entry pool and expect to get an ITA fast due to points. But my spouse's passport expires in around a year. Should we renew before entering the pool or somewhat later?
Yeah. And Ronald, too, like even though this seems like it might be a straightforward question, I would still recommend that we talk.
Yep.
If it's possible, in general, if it's possible for a family member who's accompanying to get their passport renewed and it's fairly quick and it's not going to cause other problems for ability to travel or your immigration status, then sure. If you can get that passport updated and renewed and you can do it now before you're running up against deadlines, then great. Sometimes with some countries there are extended delays on getting a passport back, so just be careful if you've got some urgency in your application.
All right, next question. This one comes from Nelson, another super. He says, I'm selected by Ontario's Express Entry Human Capital Priority Stream. Plan to apply through CEC. My employer is a Vancouver company, and I don't know, WFH in Toronto over 1 year. Can I submit to the Canadian Experience class? Okay, and this is another one that will definitely ring the triangle for you, Nelson. But obviously, if you're selected by Ontario and you're currently working for an employer in BC, that
Oh,
can
I think
cause.
it's work from home in Toronto.
Oh, is that what it is? Work from home in
I think
Toronto.
that's
Oh,
what it is.
for an okay Vancouver company. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Those things can be a factor. They absolutely can. Each of the provinces have learned very well through sad experience that it's hard to really know for certain whether someone's going to stay in the province if they're nominated. And Winnipeg is by far Manitoba and the program there. They are by far the experts in this. So if you take a look at the PNP for Manitoba, you'll see how strict they are in terms of eligibility. You know, if you have a long lost cousin who lives in BC, it almost excludes you from going through Manitoba. Now, that's maybe a little extreme, but having an employer who is in a different province and you're actively working from home and you live in Ontario, it can absolutely cause problems, even with a human capital priority stream application, which in and of itself is not employer specific. What thoughts do you have for Nelson? Anything else to add, Alicia?
Yeah, just so Nelson, if you are going to try to pitch this application like this by saying that you're working from home, you physically reside in Toronto, you're going to have to be really careful to provide that intention to live in Ontario, because that's still one of the key requirements for the Human Capital Priority Stream for OINP. Have a settlement plan, have proof that you have a long-term rental contract or maybe an ownership, or that you have property in your name. Maybe you've got a vehicle registration. Maybe you have family members who are going to school in Ontario. All of those things would be like if you've got kids that are going to school, if you have a spouse who's also working in Ontario, all these things are important to prove to immigration through OINP that, yeah, I do have a valid intention to remain living in Ontario, even if I'm working remotely. Sometimes what I do is I talk to clients about getting an official transfer, right? If you have a large company that you're working for in Canada and they have branch offices, it might just be cleaner and better to get an official transfer from the Vancouver office to the Toronto office, right? If that company has branch offices across the country. So just be careful about this, because it's possible that OINP will say, we don't believe that you have a strong enough intention to remain living in the province of Ontario if your job is tied to BC.
All right. I think this is the next one here. My sibling is a Canadian PR holder, but at the moment she is shifted to and living in Singapore, but her spouse is residing in Canada. Is it possible to claim the extra 15 CRS points with this?
And I think there was another question about siblings and half siblings. So maybe, Mark, if you want to flip over to the ministerial instructions respecting express entry. And so we'll take a look at section 31 of the ministerial instructions, and it's going to be talking about, and I'm assuming that this is an express entry application where you're trying to claim the 15 CRS points. Yes. So take a look at section 31 sub 1, and it says points for sibling in Canada. And this is where it's going to give you the nitty gritty details. So it says 15 points may be assigned to a foreign national if they or their accompanying spouse or common law partner has at least one sibling who is 18 years or older, a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, and living in Canada. So those are the first key requirements. And so if your sibling is, or spouse's sibling is not living in Canada, this is going to be a problem. The next part of it, for the person who is asking about do half siblings count, there's 31 sub 2, which says clarification for the purpose of subsection 1, a sibling of a foreign national or of the foreign national's accompanying spouse or common law partner is the biological or adoptive child of one of the three categories. So sub A would be their father or mother, or B would be their father or mother's spouse, or C would be their father or mother's common law partner. So yes, half siblings would qualify.
Yeah.
But they still have to meet the above categories of 18 years or older and living in Canada.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Muichi says, what should I do when I updated my CEC profile? The factor point increased, but the overall score didn't increase. Thanks, Mark and Alicia. This is a consult. So there's no way we can tell you what the problem is until we've actually looked at what you've entered, and those kinds of things. So slide over, book a consult with Alicia or myself here, and we can help you with navigating what the issue may possibly be.
And just
All right.
to be
Mm-hmm.
just to be generally helpful in terms of how you figure out those CRS points, there is the CRS kind of grid overview. And keep in mind, I'm assuming what's happened here is that you've hit the maximum level in one category of points, right? So if you take a look at the factor overview for how you're assigned points, if you've maxed out in one of those factors, you can't get more points in that subcategory. So that's probably what's going on, but we would have to take a look carefully and make sure you're not making other errors in the application. But if you take a look, there's only, certain things like skill transferability, and then you've got those bonus points. It caps you depending on whether you're a single applicant or whether you've got an accompanying spouse. You can only get up to a certain maximum. So it'll say maximum of how many points under each category.
Yeah, that is how it is designed. All right. Okay, we are just about wrapped up. I have and I guess this is a good opportunity to just reiterate to everyone as well. I did let's see if I have the YouTube up. I did a video and it was a live that I had scheduled, but I'm just going to pull this up. Just give me 1 second because I want to show everybody this. I got a little bit of flack from people, and I shouldn't say flack, but I got a little bit of pushback from people who were saying this one right here. So express entry, why are so many applications getting refused? Well, I want to expand this. Okay. So I am seeing more requests for information, more, just even refusals. Absolutely. Not just with express entry, but across the map. And so I have and often the refusals can be wrong. Like they can be errors because documents that are being uploaded are not being properly matched up to the file, and then officers are rejecting. So I have a reconsideration request that I'm helping to prepare a meeting with a client tomorrow. I have right now in 2 minutes a meeting with another couple who filed a spousal sponsorship who tried to update IRCC repeatedly. And, and in the end, they said, you didn't provide us what we asked. So this is a reality. And when in a world where express entry and all the other types of immigration streams are backlogged and there's tons of applications in the queue, these officers are under a tremendous amount of pressure to get applications off their plate, to to really cut into these lengthy processing times and these backlogs. And so they just finished striking. And, I'm almost guaranteed the department doesn't have too much sympathy for officers. They're setting their quotas. They're telling them how much they have to get through. And it's way faster, you guys, to simply refuse an application than it is to process it through to completion. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but there are these factors, and we are not seeing the same kind of grace and discretion that they were using and applying to applications that were deficient or somehow had problems as they did during the pandemic. So we're in a different world. And so all those people out there who are saying, oh, it's so easy, you can do it yourself. Well, you guys that are saying it, go do it yourself. Okay. But for individuals who are having trouble sleeping at night, who are coming on our channel, who are posting all these comments and questions, who are genuinely uncertain and don't know where to turn, that is why we're here. That's why Alicia and I exist, and the firm exists, and the Canadian Immigration Institute exists, and this YouTube channel. It's all designed to try to give you information that you can trust. And so we hope that you appreciate this. And Alicia, I'll let you have the last word before we shut this down.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just respond really quickly to Quiz IQ TV. And in general, no, you cannot come on a visitor visa and then switch to a work permit at the border. That is super, super dangerous. So be really careful with that. But in general, it's not allowed. So the last thing I'll say is that we're going to be gone next week. And so we will be at our conference in Ottawa, and we will not be able to host the live stream next week.
Yeah. So we're going to have 1 week off as we attend that in-person gathering for the first time in probably, 4 years, 3 years, much overdue. So we're looking forward to doing that. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again in 2 weeks from today. Take care.